Alright, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Black Box Podcast. And recently on this channel, Black Box Radio, I did a couple uploads on the Zodiac Killer. And the first one was on Lyndon Lafferty and his theory of who is the Zodiac Killer, and the other two were on a suspect, Richard Gaikowski, and putting, some arguments for, arguments against, and just examining some of that information. This one is examining the case today. We'll look at Louis Meyers, i.e., Louis Meyers. When I discuss him with other people, I always refer to him as Louis Meyers, just because didn't want to confuse things when people are doing Google searches, and when they look up Louis Meyers all the time, they seem to confuse it with a musician. So yeah, I'll be referring to him as Louis Meyers throughout the podcast. Now, this story, we'll throw in a little background to start. This story comes to us from a man named Randy Kenny, who says that Louis Meyers confessed to him on his deathbed that he was indeed the Zodiac Killer. Randy Kenny says that the Meyers confessed to starting the spree in 1968 at the age of 17. He broke up with his girlfriend, and Kenny says that evidence shows that he committed at least 5 murders. In short, not going to read through that whole article, but it does have some background information. In short, this guy, Randy Kenny, says his friend, Louis Meyers, confessed to him that he was the Zodiac Killer, and he started this sort of getting revenge against other couples because he was a jealous lover. More like a guy who is infatuated with women but has no girlfriend, in other words. Yes, and that sort of is the nutshell version. And he apparently started the first murder at 17, and he confessed 5 murders to Randy Kenny on his deathbed. Keep in mind, no audio recording, no video recording, nothing to substantiate that claim. However, the reason the man, then a teen, went on this bloody spree of at least 5 murders was originally over a girl, and hatred of girls and of couples originally. However, the 5th murder was a little different because he just robbed a taxi driver, Kenny says, and that was for drug money. So he committed 1 murder for drug money, allegedly. We're going to be examining this theory, and I want to put a lot of emphasis on this one because this is one theory that really stands out to me above the rest. When I was looking at the Richard Gaikowski evidence and just been reviewing that one for a long time, people have been discussing that one for years, and something just did not feel right. I felt that a lot of the pieces just were missing in the Richard Gaikowski one. With the case of Louis Meyers, I feel that many more things add up. However, it's not a complete picture yet. And for starters, already, we don't have the smoking gun. We don't have any sort of confession directly from Meyers, who is now deceased. This is all sort of a hearsay confession that his friend Kenny has reported. But now the other things that we have to look at are, do people believe that a 17-year-old could have committed these murders? Yeah, because to state that point again, that is one of the biggest points of contention with Louis Meyers, is that he was only 17 at the time of the first murder. Could a 17-year-old have perpetrated these crimes? And before I say anything, let's just keep that in mind, though, and let's just look at a little bit more of that. I'm going to go back to another very, very interesting piece of evidence. Meyers did live near the killings in the Vallejo area just northeast of San Francisco from 1965 to 1971. He would have gone to school with the first 2 teen victims. Meyers would have also crossed paths with another Zodiac victim at a Vallejo restaurant where he worked as a busboy, and the woman, Darlene Farron, worked as a waitress. So he's a classmate of two of them and a co-worker of Darlene Farron. That is an enormous connection. And when people talk about examining the facts, we that is just a pure fact. He had a direct connection to those three victims right there. I mean, like, he was a coworker of Darlene Farron, and he was a classmate of the first two victims. That is that just a coincidence, though? I mean, so he worked as a busboy with somebody who happened to have been murdered. A lot of people probably went to the high school, right? Are they all suspects as well? Keep that stuff in mind. We're going to keep going. Meyers also worked at a military surplus store, and his father worked at Mare Island, a Navy installation, meaning the teen would have had access to the type of military boots that left footprints at one of the crime scenes. Now, this is one thing where people thought that everything just sort of went kind of berserk in the Zodiac killer search. There are these famous footprints that were left at one of the scenes that came from a military-grade boot. And for years, they thought they were looking for a former soldier, someone who had been in the military. They thought that was a very key critical clue. However, Kenny has put forward this possibility that was not actually a military-grade boot print, that Louis Meyers just worked in a military surplus store, and that's where he got the boots. Well, that's possible. And Meyers, who returned from the army... Oh, sorry. There's actually something very important before that, before he returns from the army. Meyers joins the army and was deployed to Germany with the army from 1971 to 1973, a time period during which the Zodiac, who frequently sent letters and codes to newspapers and cops, sent nothing at all. And Meyers, who returned from the army and began a career as a long-haul trucker out of upstate New York, even admitted to a childhood friend that he was the notorious killer. That has also been substantiated by that friend. You can find interviews with him on various sites online, not even just YouTube. That guy does say in the 70s, in 1976, yeah, Louis Meyers confessed to him that he was the Zodiac killer, and that guy did not believe it, that other trucker. But okay, back to the big thing. Meyers begins working on the surplus store. He leaves the boot print at the crime scene. Then we do have 2 years of Zodiac that just goes silent. The Zodiac goes silent for 2 years. 2 years of no activity from the Zodiac killer from 1971 to 1973. And at that time, Meyers was in Germany. And apparently this has all been, completely certified. He was deployed to Germany in the army. So then, talk about things that are kind of like adding up in a weird way. They think at first they're looking for a soldier, but then the boot prints are actually just left by a guy who works at a military surplus store, who then becomes a soldier anyway, so... Yeah, talk about, twists and turns. Now, this is one thing that we kind of touched upon already, one of the ending lines of the article. The cops who invested the case some 45 years ago said it would have been a tough crime spree for a teen to pull off, and his picture looks nothing like the sketch of the Zodiac killer. Okay, if you look at the photos of Louis Meyers on Google, Louis Meyers Zodiac killer, yes, his sketch looks quite different than a lot of the other depictions. However, I don't think there's too much weight in the sketch. It's like what I've said about the Zodiac killer to a lot of people for a very long time is put those style of glasses on any Caucasian male and give him a short haircut. you'll get something pretty similar. So, I mean, it's just like, I don't think there's too much weight in that. It's like, if you look at the photos of Myers, he has much larger hair, and he has he has very dark hair that's kind of like billowing, and if you will. But I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything we need to look at as far as the sketch, because so many people look very similar to the sketch, such as Jack Torrance. In that case, apparently appears to have almost no weight at all. I don't think there's anything in the Jack Torrance mystery. However, with Meyers, the biggest things to keep in mind are his timeline seems to fit. From 1971 to 73, he was not in America. There was a halt to Zodiac activity. He has direct connections to 3 of the murder victims, and his friend Kenny has provided this plausible explanation that would have triggered the killings. That he was upset over a girl. This was sort of a revenge killing. He was just had very, very bitter feelings toward lovers. He targeted a lover's lane, and all of these things start to come together, and you do get a very clear thesis. And I do say that word because things are starting to come together. However, we have to look at some of the very complicated things here. Kenny has very little to say about the ciphers. He really does not give very much detail at all about the ciphers and what they hold. And if he had a deathbed confession from the Zodiac killer, wouldn't he mention them at all? Wouldn't he give you some more information that you could share to people? Unless Kenny just has not revealed it to the journalists yet, and he's saving that for when he writes the book. But with very little understanding of the plans that went into the ciphers, I don't. That's something that really hurts the case that Louis Meyers was the Zodiac killer, because it's like we have all of this very sort of interwoven and precise information that supports it. However, then there's this gaping hole in the theory. What do the ciphers hold? What was his intention with them? And also, that is even one thing that I don't say this as hard evidence, just a feeling. A 17-year-old plotting and planning those ciphers? Maybe. Possible. I don't know. How likely do you think that would be? It is definitely, though, something that is going to be, we need some further examination. And, that's pretty much all to say for part 1. I have a few more notes that we're going to look at in part 2, so stay with me.